Hello Model Railroaders, I'm Dave. Welcome back to the layout. Well, a little bit of a progress update to where those pins are. I've gotten all that track secured down, so that's an accomplishment, and as you can see I've got some of the foam anchors I discussed on a previous video to hold those sections in place from moving, but very easily removed to remove the risers to disassemble the modules if some point in the future it has to happen. And there's the last one there. Now the last gradient here, which is about 8 feet long. What to do here? Because let me grab the ruler. We're going from 2 inches down to ½ an inch at the other end over the 8 foot length. And you'll probably hear some tinkling outside. It's a freezing rain here in southern Ontario this weekend, a nasty freezing rainstorm, so I'm going to spend the whole day down here in working on the layout, so hopefully we'll get some accomplishment going. I'm not going outside if I can help it. Means that Railpast, if you watch any of his videos, that he probably will not be out and about today, or probably tomorrow, because it's supposed to continue into Sunday. So, but that's give a shout out to check out Railpast, RAILPAST, for some CNCP Ontario Southland and some various parts here in central Ontario. So great channel to watch, and he usually has a video up usually about 3 times a week, three or more times a week. So give his channel a check out if you've got a chance, if you like Railfan. But my problem today, this 8 foot section, do I keep it as 1 or do I split it at the 4 foot mark here? So looking at track, I need to do a removable straight piece because we've got a magnet joint here, and with the Pico track, that's a 3 foot length, so that runs to here. Now if I do it all as one continuous run, then I would add in another length of Pico flex track on the left hand side, and then I've just got a bit of Atlas flex there that I'd be able to cut down to make my transition piece, which you can see on the right there. Now otherwise, if I was to split it at the 4 foot mark, then I'd have to have another transition piece, and then I would have to do another filler piece, which would be in around 4 3/4 inches to deal with that, and then of course have another filler piece down there to make up the difference. Now to compound issues, let me move some tools out of the way so I can show you what I'm dealing with. Hopefully you can see this, but I've got about 1 millimeter or more where, because I cut both sides of this foam, I don't have a factory straight edge on this sloping piece of foam. So maybe it'll be a little more predominant here where you can see I've got a little problem with the foam wanting to float a bit. So this is where less track pieces is more conductive for the 8-foot run to stay together as one piece. However, that means I'm going to have to put a lot more, and because it's narrowing down, I have to use that style to anchor it down, and I'm going to have to do it on both sides. So that would mean 2, 4, 6, at least 8 anchors that I'm going to have to put down to keep the foam from being spongy. But on the plus side, I've got less track to use that would be used, have to be cut up to make up those smaller little bits. And I still got to do track power. If I chop it up, I can glue the foam directly to the plywood, not have to worry about the anchors, and just punch the leads, the track leads, all the way through the plywood, and it'd be hardwired and non-removable. So each aspect has its own positives. The more joints I'm going to have, the more rigid it's going to be and fixed to the plywood. The less track joints I have, there's the potential of it being spongy because of the curves. So I got to decide what I'm going to do, because this is the last bit of track I need to put down to essentially bring me down to my 1/2 inch at this point for the logging run. And then I'm going to have to move the rest of this to sort out what I'm exactly going to do as far as the yard is concerned, and how I'm going to transition that 1/2 inch in and out of the yard. And am I just going to have the yard on the 1/2 inch? Am I going to put other industry? What I would like to do is possibly put my oil refinery down in this corner where the tools are, and do a little semi-yard there, and maybe a couple of industry up in here to switch. But I haven't locked that down yet as to what I'm doing, but regardless, I need to decide, do I want the foam glued down? And to do that, I would just put some weight on it and run a bead of hot glue down the corner. So it's not a big deal to do the joint that way, or leave it removable. With the removable track, I'm going to have to be able to drop the make a pocket to, or a cavity to house the magnetic joint for the leads, as I've shown in previous videos that I'm doing. So now I've got a depth issue of where I can put that joint. Like, say I'd have to put it here. Well, I'm getting very close in my thickness. I had lots in the earlier risers because they were at a greater thickness, but say here I've got a very much less height of the riser to deal with getting that cavity dug out. Now, I'm not too concerned about having one lead for between 4 foot of track. I'm for the logging run, usually I'm going one lead every 4 feet, roughly. So that's dropping a lead there wouldn't be bad, because I'd be dropping a lead somewhere over in this area if I went with the removable piece. So each aspect has its own positives and each aspect has its own detractors. When it comes to this foam, I've of course I can do a bus line on top of, actually cut into the bottom, grooved into the bottom of that foam, and have that whole foam piece, whatever I do for the art, as a removable piece. Or I can glue it down to the layout. So that is part of my conundrum of how I want to proceed. Do I want to make it so that, like on the lower levels here, that it's bare track, and any extra work that I do as far as foam work, do I want that to be removable? Similar to these sections that I'd done, and they were removable because I actually had an 11-foot tunnel running underneath them, so I wanted to be able to get access to that track work. And that's what all the foam here was the framing around for the tunnel. So sometimes you have to make the hard decisions on what route you want to take with your layout. My main goal was to be able to remove the layout from the basement with keeping as much track and scenery intact if I ever had to move the layout again, because after 3 different layout builds of having to rip everything literally back to the individual lumber pieces, it's a lot of effort once you've got all the scenery dealt with, of getting started again. You've got to start from scratch. And yes, it opens up the opportunity, but you lose all the effort that you've laid out before. My only egress points from the basement are that large window there to get stuff out of, and the man door, which actually is, that wall there is the wall for the stairwell. So on the opposite side of that wall is the man door that comes into the basement. So it's a very sharp angle that I can really only get 4-foot sections, unless it's very, very thin and flexible. Then I can get 8-foot, but I can't get full 8-foot 1x4s through that doorway. It just is not enough room to angle that out. So lots of decisions to be made before I can make some progress. So on the next video you'll be able to see what solution I chose to do. So till then, bye for now. So I'm not going to keep you in suspense. I'm going to tack this short onto the previous video so you can see what my decision is. So what I've decided to do is anchor the foam riser down to the layout. Now the reason why I decided to go this route was flexibility, and if I find it doesn't work, I can always glue the riser down. and that is the more permanent solution, no matter which way I want to go in the future, whether it works or doesn't work. So this, though a little more difficult because I had to cut all the little angle brackets to secure them in, that was a lot of time and effort. It is the more flexible solution. So what I will do is down at this point here, as you can see the black and the red dot, I'll drop a joiner down. I've got sufficient space within the riser that I can hollow out a cavity to do my magnetic connection, and I think I'll have about 6 feet. I'll do another connection on there on this riser, and that will power that about halfway between, and then somewhere on this section I'll put in a power lead for each rail, and that will provide sufficient power going up that rise. Now, part of the other decision was I want to be able to, I don't want to say reinvent the layout, but modify the layout. So part of my thought has been to use the half-inch foam, half-inch styrofoam, and use that as a base for a good chunk of this section. So that would be about 16 feet going from in and around this section here, because each section is 4 feet. So 4, 8, 12, 16. And having the lead track at the front on the bench level, and have a whole sub in on the riser, and just to provide some 3D contouring. And because I will modify each riser so that it will join or be gapped at the joints between each section, I could take a whole section out and put in a different one with a different track plan. So that is the forward thinking I want to use on the layout. Is I don't like that track plan. I've already done all the scenic work. I'm not scraping it up off the plywood, but I can just lift that whole section out and put in a new track plan with new buildings, or even just the new building aspect, to have multiple buildings for the same spur, or the, you know, I believe Ken Patterson or model railroad hobbyists have discussed this as well, that you do your building up as a diorama and be able to have, for a particular service track, you can have multiple buildings that fit that same base dimension, and you can completely change the nature of your operating capabilities by changing the business. So say I want to do the logging run here. Well, if I take that yard out, I could put in a town in place of it with just the rail line running through it. I could change it out to have industry with the rail line running from the logging run through it and not have a yard there at all. Or the oil yard, oil complex, refinery complex that I want to put or that I'm thinking, I should say, of putting here, that's a lot of tanks and storage tanks, I should say, and all the refinery bits that, or I've got one here, I'll probably build a second one, the cracking tower. And then having, well, that's a gas tank, but I'll be building my own oil tanks using cardboard tubing. So, and some, I want to cast the domes to make it easy. So that maybe a year from now, but that is a future video that I will definitely capture of doing the mold making and casting of that and actually fabricating the tank. That's the direction I want to take some of the future aspects when I get into the scenery once all the track work is done. But I don't want to limit myself just to a specific track plan. I want to be flexible and make that interchangeability present as much as possible. And that's where this 16 feet by what are we looking at? Say 16 inches. In N scale, 16 inches you can do a lot with as far as building depth and things of that nature. So that's the direction I decided upon, and I thought I wouldn't keep you in suspense. So there you go. Till the next video, bye for now.